Good morning, everyone. Welcome to New York Buddha Dharma, here in New York City. Our center is dedicated to the teachings of our teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, whose picture is right in back of me. We meet in New York City at Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche Center in Nalanda Bodhi. Tonight, we're going to be studying about Mahapajapati, the first Buddhist nun. She has a fascinating life and comes from a really fascinating family. In a way, this is a wider story about the family that she comes from, that she's part of. I just Googled Mahapajapati and a couple of things came up which I thought was really interesting. In our series looking at key women of the Buddhist scriptures, we look at the character of Mahapajapati Gotami. She was the Buddha's foster mother as well as his maternal aunt. Legend has it that at her birth, an astrologer foretold that she would be the leader of a large following and was named Pajapati, meaning leader of a great assembly. It was further prophesied of her, as it had been of her older sister, Mahamaya, that she would be the mother of a great secular or religious ruler. When the Buddha's mother died, she took Siddhartha, the Buddha to be, and raised him as her own first child. So that's kind of like the layout of who she was. She and her sister, Mahapajapati, she was an older sister, were married to the same king. And in those days, I'm sure in parts of the world today, it's the same thing that a king might have many wives, or a queen might have many husbands. And these two sisters who came from a land called Kolia in India married the king, King Suhodana. The way I would like to present this is that, first of all, just to say that when the Buddha attained enlightenment, many people came to study with him and live with him in the forest, and they became monastics. The Buddha started a whole monastic sangha, but they were all men. Queen Mahapajapati, who was his aunt, and the sister of his mother, who had passed away when he was 7 days old, wanted to become a nun. She wanted to join the sangha, which he welcomed. However, at that time, the Buddha didn't feel it would be acceptable in society to have women as monastics, because traditionally women had a very specific type of role that they had in the family, whereas they got married, they left their family and moved in with the husband. In this case, the husband was a king, and that's where they lived. They never left the palace walls on it alone. And if they went into town or something like that, they would always be accompanied by servants or family members. And they lived a very protective life. So for them to become a monastic, that would have meant that they had to leave the family. They would have to live on their own in the forest, go out and beg for food, and it was unheard of for women to do things like that. I guess unless they were very, very poor, or they had different circumstances financially, or maybe had a different caste system. But even then, I think it would have been unheard of for women to do things like that. In Tibet, I'm not sure about India, but maybe they had a great tradition of women yogis, where the women would go out and practice in caves, just like the men. And maybe they had yogis in India, too. I'm not sure. What do you think? Maybe. I'm sure they did, but in Mahapajapati's case, she was royalty, and things like that just weren't done. So that's kind of like the groundwork, the ground of her life. So basically, I'm going to introduce these characters like a play, so you can kind of like get the feel of what their lives were like and what they did and who they were. So first I would like to introduce the two sisters. Mahapajapati was the younger sister to Mahamaya. They both married King Suhodana, who was the head of the Sakya clan in the country of India. And first I'm going to tell Mahamaya's story. So Mahapajapati, the fruitional aspect of her life is that she did join the Sangha of the Buddha, and she became the first woman that the Buddha ordained as a monastic, as a nun, and eventually she taught and nurtured women that came into the Sangha, and eventually she had like 500 monastic women living in one space. So her prediction at birth, where she would be a leader of great following, was a monastic Sangha, was her following. She lived to be 120 years old, and she had quite an amazing life. Okay, so first let's go right to the beginning of, I'm reading from, I'll be taking some talks from a play called Mahamaya, which is the story of these two amazing sisters. And of course, Siddhartha and members of his family. Oh, here's a quote right in the beginning. It says, "Since we regard ourselves to be our obscurations, we are always looking away from our own Buddha nature," which is what John was talking about earlier. And that's by Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche. Okay. So, here we go. This is Finding a Mother. 2,560 years ago, our great Lord Shakyamuni Buddha lived in Tushita heaven as a deva, a god. A great bodhisattva by the name of Svetaketu. Since the time had come for him to take rebirth as a Buddha, the other devas living there besieged him. "Lord, the time has come for you to be born in the world for the last time. We are very happy. Please take rebirth on earth now." So he was living in Tushita heaven. The Buddha was living there, and the other devas were asking him to come to the earth and to teach. So because of his great compassion and concern for the suffering of all sentient beings, the Bodhisattva looked down on earth to make sure that the 5 requirements necessary for his final rebirth in the world were met. So what were those requirements? In order for a bodhisattva to take birth, he had to have 5 requirements: the right time, the right continent, the right area, the right caste, the right mother to help him accomplish his goals. Now, in India at the time was a very stringent, very tight caste system. And basically, even if you were the Lord Buddha himself coming to earth, if you were the lowest caste and untouchable, no one would pay attention to you. So it had to be a high Brahmin caste at that time for people to listen to anything you had to say. And also, at the time, all the Buddhas were born in Jambudvipa in India, because India was a place of great learning and knowledge. The people there were more spiritually advanced. The area of Kapilavatthu had a just and good king and queen and many righteous people living there. They were of a high caste so that people would more readily accept them. Now, Buddhas have very specific type of bodies. They have major and minor marks on their bodies. And so in order for a woman to be able to hold that type of sentient being that would come into her, she would herself have to be someone that was very uplifted, someone that was very spiritual. And so while this bodhisattva was looking down on earth, he saw in the forest in India, he saw 5 women. In those days, it was very traditional for women or men to go out into the forest and make offerings to the forest gods. So they had their trays, and they were of royal caste, but still they all went out and made offerings. And they had the trays of food and incense and flowers and drinks. And they came out into the forest, and as they were making offerings to the forest gods, each one was making aspiration prayers of what the benefit of these offerings would be. Because when you make aspiration prayers, the offerings are much stronger and much wider and much bigger and have a greater effect. So, okay. The women, they were dressed in different saris. So the blue sari said, I make aspiration prayers for a great peace throughout the world. The yellow sari said, I make aspiration prayers for a bountiful harvest. The red sari said, I make aspiration prayers for kindness and compassion towards animals. The green sari said, I make aspiration prayers for good health throughout the world. And then there was the 5th sari, which was the white sari. And she said, I make aspiration prayers to give birth to a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings in the 3 realms. That was her aspiration prayer. And when the Bodhisattva heard this, he examined each woman carefully. He rested his eyes on Queen Mahamaya, the white sari, the wife of King Suhodana of the Sakya clan, from the land of Kapilavatthu, the great country of India. And he said, I can see Queen Mahamaya is a woman of great virtue and high birth, beautiful, gracious, intelligent, loving, and kind. She is truly concerned about the welfare of all sentient beings. And then he heard Mahamaya say, I long to have a child of my own to love and care for. I pray that I may give birth to a Buddha. a child who would be of benefit to all sentient beings. In fact, throughout all her lifetimes, Queen Mahamaya had made aspiration prayers to give birth to a Buddha. It was such a woman that the Bodhisattva knew would make a suitable vessel. So then, that night, Queen Mahamaya goes home. She goes to sleep and she has a dream. She dreamed that the Devis, divine beings or gods, from the 4 directions of the earth, took her to Lake Anatota on top of the Himalayan mountains. The Bodhisattva Svetaku descended from Tushita, the Buddhist pure realm, as a white baby elephant, carrying a pink lotus flower. After circling her 3 times, he entered her body through the right side. Unlike a 10 months later, while wandering and admiring the beautiful flowering trees in the garden of Lumbini, Queen Mahamaya felt her labor pains. Holding on to the branch of an ashok tree, the baby came out of her right side, but the queen felt no pain. Unlike a normal infant who was helpless without his mother and father, the child displayed a remarkable miracle by taking his first step immediately after he was born. The young child, in fact, took 7 steps in each direction, proclaiming, "I am the chief of the world. There is no equal to me. I am supreme. This is my last rebirth." Many miracles around the world were displayed to mark this miraculous birth, such as flowers blooming in space and Amrita, blessed water, flowing from the sky as an offering for the mother and child. So that was the beginning of the way the Buddha of our time, Shakyamuni Buddha, came into this world. Unfortunately, Queen Mahamaya got very ill 7 days after the baby was born, and she knew that she was dying. And it was very, very sad for her, because this is the child she always prayed for, and finally he was here, and then she knew that she had to leave. So what does she do? She calls on her sister Mahapajapati, and she said, "I know I'm dying. It breaks my heart to leave this world, leave my child behind. So I'm asking you to please take care of my child as though he were your own son." And so Mahapajapati looked at her older sister, and she said, "Of course, I will dedicate my life to him and take care of him." And so then, after Mahamaya passed away, that's what she did. She took him under her wing and nurtured him. Kind of a sad story, but when I told this story to some children that we were doing this play with, they were very upset because the thought of losing their mother was very overwhelming for them. Anyway, now we get to Prince Siddhartha, and Lady Mahapajapati. Prince Siddhartha was an unusual child, and in this story, he was a bodhisattva that came to, and his destiny was to be the future Buddha. But he lived in a very kind of like restricted society in that his father wanted him, he was a remarkable child and an amazing at everything he did. He was the best student, he was the best archer, he was the best at every game, at debate. He was just extraordinary. And his father, King Suddhodana, had great hopes for him that he would take over the family business, which was being a king. But he had different ideas because he was very interested in he was interested in people. He left the palace, and this very famous story that most people know, and he snuck out of the palace with his attendant and his horse, and he went out into the city to see what was going on there, and he saw birth, old age, sickness, death, a lot of suffering, which he never saw in the palace, because when he was born, they predicted he might be a great ruler, he might be a great teacher, and that our world had long awaited the birth of such a great one. So his father made sure that he never saw anything unpleasant in the palace so that he wouldn't become a great teacher. He wanted him to be a great ruler. In any case, his aunt, Mahapajapati, was his confidant, was his supporter, and she knew that he was very unhappy in the palace. And so when the age of 29, he confided in her and he said, I really want to leave. And she said, I support you 100%. And he finally did leave. And when he came back, 7 years later, he came back to visit his family, but he came back as the Buddha. He was enlightened. He's wearing different clothes. In the palace, he had long hair. His head was shaven. He had monastics with him. And everyone just completely, fell in love with him. They all wanted to follow his teachings. And even his father, his whole family, everyone followed his teachings. And so great people had faith in him. But he stayed in the palace for a while, and then he left because he was a monastic, and maybe it was the rainy season and they did a retreat in the mountains or in the forest. And Mahapajapati came to him and she said, I really want to become a follower. And he said, definitely, yeah, wonderful. She said, I really want to become a monastic. And he said, no, that's not going to work in our society. I don't think people are ready for that yet. And then he went off, and there were other royal women in the palace from her family and also from King Suddhodana's family, and they all wanted to become monastics. They wanted to really immerse themselves in the teachings of the Buddha. But because you can't really do that when you're living in a palace and you have day-to-day activities, they were really very serious about practicing meditation and really studying with him firsthand. Then they decided, you know what, we're just going to do it. They took off all their beautiful clothes and jewelry, and they cut off their hair, and they just put on yellow robes, and off they went to where he was teaching in another city. And when they got there, after walking for many days without shoes, these women were not used to that kind of activity, and their feet were all bloody, and they were exhausted, and they were dirty. And so then they come upon Venerable Ananda, who was one of the Buddha's main disciples. And he sees them walking on the road. And Ananda was also, I think, the Buddha's cousin. And so he knew him. He knew Lady Mahapajapati because they all lived in the same kingdom, the same palace. And he said to her, Lady Gautama, or Lady, that was a name they called her because Gautama Buddha, it was the place where she came from. He said, Lady Gautama, what are you doing here? And with tears streaming down her face, she said, Venerable Ananda, we have given away all our possessions, walked for 15 days, sleeping by the roadside and begging for food to show that we are capable of living like monks. Speak to the Lord Buddha on our behalf. We wish to be ordained as nuns. And Ananda said, yes, please wait here. I will speak to Lord Buddha on your behalf. Then he goes to the Buddha's hut. And he said, Lord Buddha, your aunt is here with all the royal ladies. He described the scene he had just seen, and he said, Lord, is it possible for women to attain enlightenment? That was the bottom line, because maybe he was thinking, well, the Buddha doesn't think that women can attain enlightenment, so therefore he won't ordain them. And the Buddha said, beyond a doubt, women can attain enlightenment. Then why is my Lord reluctant to ordain his aunt? After all, hadn't Lady Mahapajapati nurtured and raised him as her own child? Please have compassion and ordain her. After a long silence, the Buddha called his main disciples around him and explained the situation to them. The Omniscient One explained it was not discrimination against women which made him hesitate to ordain them. He was just unsure of how to open the monastic sangha up to women without creating harmful conflict within and outside the sangha. The Buddha asked his disciples what they thought the best way to resolve the situation was. After a while, the Venerable Shariputra said, and Shariputra was, I guess, one of his very, very close disciples. And Shariputra, so he kind of left it up to the monastics to figure it out. And Shariputra said, it would be wise to create statutes which define the roles of nuns within the Sangha. Such statutes would diminish public opposition, which is certain to erupt since there has been discrimination against women for thousands of years. I suggest 8 extra rules pertaining to the ordination of women. So this is how he was going to make them sort of lesser than men, so no one would think that they were equal to the men. Everyone agreed this would be the best way to handle the situation. Ananda went back to the women who were eagerly awaiting his return. He explained the rules to Lady Mahapajapati. Even though these 8 rules were somewhat harsh, Lady Mahapajapati said, "We are very happy to accept them." They bowed to each other and Ananda went back. Now the 8 extra rules, one of the women said, seems very unfair. And why are we accepting them? They wanted to know. Aren't we as good as the men? What does Lady Mahapajapati think? Because they were looking to her as she was their queen. And Lady Mahapajapati knew that this was the Buddha's way of working with the society in India at the time, and it seemed a small price to pay for the great freedom that women would now have to fully practice the Dharma the way of peace. So it was a great freedom for women at that time to be able to practice fully without any household obligations. And 8 extra rules didn't really mean that much to her. Lady Mahapajapati was the first Buddhist nun to be ordained by the Buddha and the first woman Buddhist teacher. So not only did she become a monastic, but she became a teacher, a Dharma teacher. She lived to be 120 years old and dedicated her life to practicing and teaching the Dharma and nurturing the community of nuns. She was among the first women to become enlightened in the Buddhist time. In these 2 poems, Lady Mahapajapati pays tribute to her sister and also proclaims her enlightenment. And Lady Mahapajapati says in these poems, Mahamaya gave birth to Gautama, the Buddha, for the sake of all. She has driven back the pain of the sick and the dying. But I have seen the Blessed One. This is my last body, and I will not go from birth to birth again. So that's her story. And every monastic woman pays homage to her. Does anyone have any questions?
What were the 8 rules?
It's still really? After 2,000 years?
Absolutely. They're still in place. The Vinaya rules, they have 8 extra rules for the women. And if now that you've heard the story, when you go to a gathering of a Tibetan teacher, traditional gathering, and you see the monastic sangha there, the women, the nuns have their spot, and the monks have their spot. And even if it's a very high nun, when just some like young monk walks by, he's the senior. It's still like that. And the men always have the best spot in front. And the women are like in the back, or I don't know. But I noticed that after I learned the story, I started watching and seeing how the seating arrangement was. Though it's still pretty much like that.
So what the 8 extra rules?
Well, someone could Google it on their phone. That's a good question. I should know that. I think one is definitely that a male monastic is always ahead of them. But I don't know. You're looking it up? He's looking it up. It is definitely still in place. And interestingly enough, there came a time where women weren't even having full ordination. Like Pema Chodron, who's from our Sangha, she was a student of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, she became a nun. And in order for her to receive full ordination as a nun, she had to go to China because no one was doing it in the West. I think maybe the 16 Karmapa was doing it in Tibet, but somehow that tradition stopped. And now with the 17 Karmapa, is that teacher over there on top, he last year started ordaining full ordination of nuns, and he's completely pro-women and women practitioners. And he in India, where he lives, he had a whole ordination ceremony, and nuns from all around the world came to be ordained by him, full ordination.
But Kandra Rinpoche, she has her own monastery. And they all full ordained.
Which one?
Kandro.
Mindro, yeah. I mean, her monastery just a little bit.
Does she ordain nuns? Does she? She does? Okay.
It's, I think it's around 150. It's a small monastery.
Yes.
But it's been around.
Yes, I know she has a very strong monastic sangha of women. Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
What about your Buddha's wife?
Yasodhara. Yasodhara. Yasodhara, they have an interesting story. Yasodhara was the Buddha's wife, and they had a son, Rahula. And she herself was a great healer. They met when they were teenagers. They knew each other their whole life. But as they got older, they got married when I guess they were both 16. Maybe he was a little older, I'm not sure. They got married young. And the reason why is because King Suhodana really wanted to make sure that Siddhartha was fully tied down, and so he wouldn't leave the palace. So they presented him with the royal princesses of the kingdom, and he chose Yasodhara. But they already knew each other. And she and her mother, and they came from a long line of women healers. So her advocation in life, besides being a royal princess, was to heal the sick. And she would go into the village, she would help poor people. She and her mom did that together. And Siddhartha really admired that about her, because he himself was a spiritual person, and he himself knew that his destiny in this world was just not to be in a small little kingdom. That his destiny, he felt, was bigger than India and bigger than like the whole planet. He said, I have to go out and work with myself in a different way. So when he decided to leave, she supported it, because it wasn't like she wasn't doing anything herself, because she was a healer and he was in his own way a healer, and they supported each other as husband and wife, but also their own spiritual journey. And they had a great, loving, wonderful relationship. So when he left, she also started leading kind of a life of a yogi in the palace. She didn't wear the beautiful clothes anymore. She cut her hair off, and she led a life of study and meditation. And then 7 years later, when he came back, Rahul at this point was at least maybe 7 or 8 years old, maybe 9. Everyone joined the Buddhist Sangha. Rahula eventually joined members of his family, and I think eventually Yasodhara may have joined. I'm not sure if she became a monastic, but I know that she didn't, yeah.
He refused to give her full ordain.
Why was that?
I don't remember the reason, but she asked for that, but he refused.
What?
He refused.
Oh, he refused.
Oh, I finished.
You could say it again.
Yeah, he...
It's on.
Oh, it's on.
Just hold it up to your mouth.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I remember, that she asked for to be ordained, but...
She asked.
Yeah.
But he said no.
No. At that time, maybe that was the reason, because it wasn't, publicly accepted.
Yeah.
And she didn't follow him. She stayed in the palace.
She stayed in the palace.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
It's really racist.
Oh.
It raises the issue of the position of women in the Buddhist Sangha over the centuries. I mean, it's been a very patriarchal society altogether, in the world. And certainly the Buddhist Sangha reflected that. There's a group, another Buddhist group up in Westchester that I'm a part of, and it meets in Irvington at the Eileen Fisher headquarters. And we're doing a course right now on prominent women in the Sangha, and also just the female principle, which is called Dakini principle. And we've been focusing on the few prominent women in Tibetan history. And the most prominent one is Yeshe Tsogyal, who was the consort of Padmasambhava when he went to Tibet. She was a Tibetan and became his consort. And also before her, when Padmasambhava was in India, there was Princess Mandarava, who also became his student and his consort. Both of them achieved enlightenment and became great teachers in their own right. Yeshe Tsogyal also left a lot of terma. Terma are hidden or revealed treasures, treasure texts, teachings of Padmasambhava's. In fact, all of his terma pretty much were hidden by her. And it's interesting that both of them had to go through great trials and ordeals, both Princess Mandarava and Yeshe Tsogyal, including being raped, by men and, huh?
5 or 6 months.
What?
Five men.
5 men. Yeah, there were many men, yeah. In Princess Mandarava's case, they tried to rape her, but she manifested as a wrathful form and scared the hell out of them, and then converted them to Buddhism. In Yeshe Tsogyal's case, they did rape her, and then she exhibited such kindness that she converted them into Buddhism. Both of them had to go through enormous trials. Yeshe Tsogyal spent a year supposedly eating nothing but rocks, in caves. And then she spent another year naked in the Himalayas, generating inner heat to stay alive. And so there are all these stories that, they were great yogis, great yoginis. And then there's another figure that we're going to be taking a look at too. Her name is Machik Labdrun, and she is the person who brought forward the teachings of Chud, which were, they're traced back to the original Dujum Lingpa. And she was a very prominent woman. I think all this is changing, though. I mean, if you look around today at the Buddhist teachers, especially among the Westerners who are prominent, I mean, I think they're mostly women, the most prominent ones. I mean, I think of Pema Chodron. I think of Sharon Salzberg, Tara Brach,
Judith Simmer Brown,
and Judy Leaf, and who? Huh? Yeah,
Judy Leaf.
Judy Leaf.
And Ziga Control's wife, Elizabeth.
Right. I forget her last name.
Namgyal or?
Yeah, Elizabeth Namgyal.
She's a great teacher. Well,
so I think it's changing now, and there's yeah.
Well, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, when he came here, he had many students, men and women, and he treated them equally. Women became meditation instructors just like the men, and teachers, and many of them were great scholars, great practitioners. So, Sasha?
Michelle, it was lovely, thank you. And I want to bring it into our current life, what's happening right now. Oops. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh. So I said thank you, in terms of everything that you're speaking about and bringing it into the relevance that's going on in the current in the news, you know, and how women are becoming so important on levels that no one ever could have understood, that they're starting to speak out. And, you know, telling the stories that you're telling, it's been going on for years. But for some reason, because of the patriarchal society, it's been, you know, lots of obscurations. So it's like you're revealing treasures by speaking about this at this point, and I think the world needs to hear about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just one thing after another that's happening in regards to how women are being treated.
Well, I think the main thing that the Buddha said when Ananda asked him, do you think women can attain enlightenment? And he said, without a doubt. Because Buddha nature is not gender-oriented. Buddha nature is what every sentient being has. And so if you work with yourself, if you have a great teacher who can help you, you can attain enlightenment. It doesn't matter what your gender is. And he understood that, because that's the ironic thing about Buddhism is, I always find, if people actually have faith in the Buddha's teachings, because he said that everyone possesses the enlightened gene in their heart. Everyone has the Buddha nature. Or as Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, basic goodness. If that's true, why discriminate against anyone? Everyone's true nature is an enlightened being. So whoever we meet, if we really want to, it's totally up to us, see sentient beings as enlightened. Wherever you look, you see Buddhas. I don't see sentient beings, I see Buddhas. That's the view. And when you have that view, then you treat people with kindness, love, and respect, no matter what. But people don't have that view. That's the thing. And so all of these other things happen because they centralize into themselves, and so they view the world on how they see things. And that's a very narrow view. Anyone else? Because I wanted to end with a very nice little story about Siddhartha and his mom, Mahamaya. You know, when I was in a Xerox store downtown, Xeroxing copies of this play, the man there was from India, but he was not a Buddhist. And he said, Mahamaya, and he had such reverence for her. Wherever you go in the Buddhist world, no matter what, or when you go to Asia, Mahamaya is a woman that everyone respects, which is its great virtue. So I'd like to end it with just reading this little scene of when Mahamaya is dying, and then also the fruitional part of that. Queen Mahamaya enjoyed being a mother. She loved her beautiful son Siddhartha very much. True to the prediction, at the time of his birth, the young prince truly was a remarkable child. He walked, talked, and understood and spoke as soon as he was born. So Siddhartha said to his mother, "Mother, please tell me a story." Mahamaya said, "Once upon a time, a child was born a prince and grew up to be a great king who ruled over the 3 worlds. Queen Mahamaya knew that her dream to give birth to a Buddha, an enlightened being who would benefit all sentient beings, had come true. Queen Mahamaya spent every moment with her child. Sadly, though, Queen Mahamaya's health began to fail, and she fell gravely ill. Queen Mahamaya fought against death because she wanted to be able to be there to see her son growing up to be such a fine man. But she could not stay in her physical body because of the illness that consumed her. And she said, I know I am dying. So Queen Mahamaya sits her son on her lap and has a conversation with him, knowing that this will be the last communication she has with him. My precious son, I love you very much. Please don't forget that your mother loved you unconditionally. Son, there are two kinds of love in this world. The first is relative love, which is very fleeting and brought about by causes and conditions. The other is unconditional love, which is the love we feel for all sentient beings, no matter what happens. Son, please know unconditional love brings great healing and benefit to all beings. Open your heart to all beings, for this is your heritage. Yes, Mother, I will. Son, take pride in your family heritage and your good human rebirth. Feeling good about yourself will help you see the good in others. Yes, Mother, I will. Son, although you were born a prince and enjoy the comforts of palace life, there are many beings in this world less fortunate than you, who will one day rely on you for help. Please remember them. I will remember them, Mother. Son, all beings on earth want to be happy. Promise me that each day you will think about what you can do to help them regardless of their status and their caste. I promise I will think of them, Mother. Queen Mahamaya told the prince that although she would not be there to raise him, she would watch over him, and if he ever needed any guidance, to think of her, and she would help him. He promised his mother that he would remember her words. Mother, will we ever see each other again? Son, throughout our many lifetimes we were mother and child. I know in my heart we will see each other again. And then he said, Mother, I promise I will come to you in the future and teach you what I have discovered. Prince Siddhartha kissed his mother, told her that he loved her very much, and how grateful he was to her for giving him life, and that he would never forget her kindness. Queen Mahamaya asked to see her younger sister, Lady Mahapajapati. Dearest sister, I will soon be leaving this world. Please take care of my son as though he were your own child. And so then when Mahamaya died, the Devis came and took her to Tushita heaven, to the pure realm, and that's where she lived. So at the end of our story, a promise kept. Queen Mahamaya was a woman of great virtue, and because of her many good deeds, was reborn as a Devi in a pure realm. No longer burdened by the constraints of her physical body, she rested in complete equanimity. From there she was able to watch over her son, Siddhartha, and guide him throughout his life. Many times when Prince Siddhartha struggled with decisions, he thought about his mother and wondered how she would have advised him, what she would have suggested he do. Like an invisible cord that ran between them, Prince Siddhartha could hear and feel his mother's presence and listen for her words of wisdom. This is what connected him to the deep spiritual guidance he needed to proceed on the challenging path he had chosen. When Siddhartha finally did attain enlightenment and realization, many beings gathered round to hear his words of wisdom. Great numbers of people joined the Sangha of monks and nuns. Even with all his disciples and great fame, the Lord Buddha, the Omniscient One, never forgot the promise he had made to his sweet mother, Queen Mahamaya, so long ago, to come to her after he had achieved the way and teach her as well. And so it came to pass, the great Lord Shakyamuni Buddha, at the age of 41, 7 years after he had attained enlightenment, traveled to the pure realm of Tushita heaven, where his mother, Queen Mahamaya, had taken rebirth as a Devi. In order to repay her kindness, Lord Buddha, the Omniscient One, spent a 3-month rainy season retreat giving Abhidharma teachings to his mother and the host of Devis living there. Abhidharma is a survey of the psychology of the human mind. Through this great kindness, Queen Mahamaya attained enlightenment. In this way, their journey of many lifetimes together was now complete. Should we dedicate the merit? By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings attain brilliant glory. Thank you all for coming. You're welcome.